So, by show of hands, how many of you think that I took the wrong path to get from there to here? Now, once again, by show of hands, how many of you can actually prove that that was the wrong path? That's exactly the #1 reason communicating change in the workplace actually fails. Change is like being in a foreign country. You know where you are and you know where you need to get. But you can ask for directions even though you don't know which path to take, it's going to slow you down. And depending on who you ask, it can beget different answers. Somebody might tell you to take a different path, another person might have a different path. And even if the path is not defined, that's not the only concern. Another concern is that the path might not be agreed upon by everybody. I closely worked with one team, and the manager had set a goal of having all the tickets come into his team resolved within 24 hours. And what the employees ended up doing, some of them, they were closing tickets that were missing some information. Rather than reaching out to the customer, they would just close the ticket and ask the customer to reopen a new ticket when they were able to get all the information. That was acceptable by the employee standards, but not by the manager standards. But they can't really hold the employees accountable because that was not laid out. The path is not clear. Sometimes the goals might be defined adequately. The goals might not be defined adequately, even though the path is. We have to know where do we want to be, how do we measure success. It has to be measurable, clear, concise, and non-technical. If we use a lot of technical jargon, the message might be lost. That's where, over time, we can't even set up checkpoints. In the end, we're either on our goal or we just completely missed it. Before the monetary system was in place, a barter system was actually in existence, where it was also known as a double coincidence of wants. I have a piece of paper, and if somebody else has a pen, the only way for me to get the pen is if I give you the piece of paper, you have to want that, and I have to want the pen as well. Change is kind of similar. Management wants a goal to be attained, and if they kind of have to give the employee something in return. Employees are usually going to want a reward or recognition for their hard work that goes into implementing the change. If that is missed, usually the employees are just not going to be motivated to implement the change. Martin Luther King, when he had an idea, he actually started off by narrating a story and laying out his dreams. He made it visual. He said, I have a dream. He didn't say, I have a great strategy. Like Lao Tzu said, the best change is what the people think they did themselves. Sometimes there's just one-way communication during change, and what that results in is that employees, they might not even have the resources that are required of them. They might not have the manpower, they might not have the budget, or they might not even have the training. Communicating change is sometimes just not standardized. What that means is it ends up being kind of like a game of Chinese whispers or telephone, however you know it. One group is briefed about what the change is, what's required of them, and they're in charge of communicating to a subgroup, and that subgroup communicates to a subgroup. By the end, the message gets to the last party. It's completely different than what it set out to be. Also, interpretation of each group is going to be different as well. So once again, that contributes to the distortion of the message as it passes along through each agent. The end result might be that one group is completely undoing each other's efforts, or they're just duplicating each other's efforts. Either way, it's just waste of resources. Lack of feedback and follow-through is also related to just one-way communication. Sometimes management is just not going to be able to get feedback and incorporate it the way they're supposed to, and remove roadblocks. What that means is change is going to be missing deadlines that were set out initially. One way around that is by assigning change buddies, mentors, or establishing a task force so everybody knows there's one point that if you get stuck or if you have a concern, you can go over there to get it addressed. The speed of change might also be too fast or too slow. Usually that happens when management is just not aware of all the work that actually goes into a process. Sometimes that's just not possible because an organization is so huge. And if that's the case, if a change is actually going too slow, people might become demotivated because they just don't see anything changing. They're putting in all this effort and there are basically no results. If it's too fast, once again, they might be demotivated because they just can't keep up. Management must recognize all phases of change. In each phase, you have to communicate in a different way. During the beginning, everybody is kind of cautious, they're scared, they're nervous, and this is where the sell phase actually comes into play. You have to communicate with the employees and tell them why they need to incorporate this change. It's not enough just to say, this is what we require from you, and this is what you need to do. During the confusion phase, you actually see negative results, and this is where you kind of have to keep that in mind and make sure that people don't get demotivated and they don't think that the plan itself is bad. Later on, you start to see results during experimentation, discovery and insight, practice and feedback. During practice and feedback, if you fail to incorporate, once again, that two-way communication comes in. If you don't incorporate the feedback into your plan and improve, you're going to see your results start declining again. But if you can actually incorporate what you learned from this and you kind of just adapt your plan going along, you can achieve true competence. The components of change. Each organization can kind of be broken down into these categories. In the beginning, you're going to have the pioneers and the early adopters that jump on into anything that's new. They are the leaders. They want to take charge. They want to lead, followed by the fence-sitters, roadblocks, and deniers. But once you have your early adopters on board, that's the tipping point. Change is an ongoing process. We have to realize that and keep in mind it doesn't stop. Starts with the plan phase, goes into act, implement. You have to reflect back, see what roadblocks are encountered, and you have to adapt and change your plan accordingly. Once it's in effect, you go into the observe phase. It's still not done. You have to see how the change is being is actually performing, and then you go back to the plan phase. You improve on it, and you implement it again, and just repeat the cycle all over again. Global economy contributes to why we actually need change. Technology grows at a very fast pace. We have to adapt. If we don't, our competitors are going to overtake us. We're not competing only on a local scale anymore, but on a global scale. Buyers are smart. They can compare prices and quality of goods. And the consequences of mismanaged change can actually be tremendous. Even though change is required, we have to implement it in a good way. And if we don't, that can be a fatal blow to any organization. Thank you.
Yeah, sir. How do you think you went?
I was kind of nervous, but I guess overall it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be.
You made great eye contact and you're well researched. So.
I love the beginning. That was awesome. When you walked out, I looked around, everyone was kind of looking at each other. I love the beginning and slides, man. I love it. You know, that's great there. It was awesome.
I don't want to beat the beginning to death, but it wasn't just great, but it was so relevant to what you were saying. So it was an attention getter that made a point to your slides. That's the perfect attention getter.
Absolutely.
One more.
I think you caught the whole assignment together, which is persuading us to do something. You broke our complete train of thought at the beginning and saying, guys, you can't prove to me that I took a longer route. And then you went to your presentation and you convinced us of it. It's not a presentation, it's actually a persuasion presentation. You're persuading us and you did that very well.
Great. Thank you.